Hello, nerds, and welcome to the Pretendium Compendium. My name is Randi.
And my name is Nathaniel.
And we are your intrepid co-hosts in this podcast. What is this podcast about, Nathaniel?
Quite a bit. I feel like we're going to spend the next 20 to 30 minutes explaining what it's about. But if I had to put it in a nutshell, Dungeons and or Dragons.
So this is going to be our episode 0, and in this episode we're going to talk a little bit about ourselves, who we are, what interested us in this idea, and then we're going to actually start with the content in episode 1. So
That's some primo tent right there.
there should be 3 episodes in your feed right now, if all goes according to plan. So if you're not interested in getting to know us, which is understandable, just move on to the next episode in which we talk about our first 2 monsters.
If you hate us, but you like the things we say, just skip this where you find out if you like us or not.
So like Nathaniel said, this is a podcast about Dungeons and Dragons, but this isn't going to be a podcast where we talk about rules extensively.
No.
And this is not going to be a podcast where we play through campaigns.
Absolutely. And it's worth noting, one reason that this attracted us, actual play, Twitch, and podcasts are huge right now. So Randy and I thought, why don't we not do one of those?
Yes, exactly. And they're engaging, but you'll also notice that there are only 2 of us.
Yes.
And campaigns don't really work with 2 people.
Well, they do. You just need a safety word.
Oh, okay. So I figured we can start by talking about us, who we are as people and players. And so I actually want to begin by asking you, Nathaniel, what kind of player are you and what kind of games have you played in the past?
In a word... Disruptive. Yeah, I'm a terrific role player in the sense that I get very into it.
And you're good at voices.
Yep.
And you come up with good characters.
I always have some dummy accent in my back pocket. The part where I have to follow the rules or pay attention or make things progress, that's where it falls apart for me. As far as what I've played in the past, I was brought up on Rifts from Palladium Games, Shadowrun, and Street Fighter the storytelling game.
So there's a Street Fighter game?
Yeah.
Can you tell me a little bit about it?
Yes, there's a Street Fighter the storytelling game, and this was in the 90s. So Street Fighter was at peak popularity.
Okay.
And this was also when White Wolf was at peak popularity as a games publisher, so they managed to secure the license.
It was a White Wolf game.
Yes.
I didn't realize it was a White Wolf game.
Which works perfectly because you have a system that is based very, very heavily on social interaction, and then you have a storytelling game based on a property that has no story whatsoever. And it's worth noting that both Rifts and Street Fighter are sometimes listed among the worst games ever made. So I'm really glad that was my baptism by fire. And more recently, I've played World of Darkness with you and some friends of ours and some in-laws of yours.
And we might want to say specifically we have played a mage game and a changeling game. So I don't think you've actually played a vampire, have you?
I've never played a vampire.
Because that is the most popular World of Darkness.
We played the Dark Ages.
The Dark Ages. Okay, I completely forgot about it.
My character was basically a leprechaun, but vampire rules.
The game that fizzled out because the storyteller thought we weren't smart enough.
Is this of any interest to anybody?
So, I wanted to talk real quick about your disruptive nature. Because we
I'm an agent of chaos.
We have not always gamed together, but starting about after graduate school, the 2 of us met in graduate school. We gamed together a lot more frequently, and the last time we gamed together, the rule was created that Nathaniel and I could not sit next to each other.
Yes.
And I feel like that's a very important thing to get out there immediately. Yeah. And so one of the pitches I initially had for this podcast was a podcast about Dungeons and Dragons by your worst players.
Oh, yes. Yeah, forget expert designers and, no Vin Diesels, no Matt Mercers here. These are people who don't really know how the game is played and might not be very good at it.
See, the thing I will say, to quickly list what I've played, my very first game was a vampire game, so World of Darkness is what I'm more comfortable with. I understand World of Darkness. Like, that's a system that I'm comfortable with.
I live there every day.
I love it. I've played Vampire, Mummy, Changeling, and Mage.
Damn.
Yeah. Mummy was the best.
I want to play a mummy.
It's really good. It's the only basis in World of Darkness for good. Like, all of your other characters are kind of gritty or have the potential for evil, and mummies are the only one where it's like, we were all a bunch of good idiots.
Yeah.
Like, we did dumb things
Well,
because we were so nice.
Historically speaking, though, it's because mummies are benign creatures.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, that's why you eat them.
Yes.
So I've played a Star Wars game, which was 3.5 edition rules. I've played a 4E D&D game, which I've actually played a couple, but I played one for several sessions. And I love the storyteller, and I don't want to say anything bad about him, but that was the one where he rolled 1 die for all the monsters for everything. So if they all got a crit, the party died. And I actually don't think I'm a bad role player. I am the one who I will try my best not to use out of character knowledge. I will try my best to come up with a character that is helpful. Like, I'll pull my other players my peers before I begin to make sure I make something that complements the group. I just have a really hard time paying attention.
Okay.
That's why I never learned to play Magic.
Oh, fair dues. So you're really helpful, like the time you helped one of our game masters poison the entire rest of the group. But that's a story for another day.
I did what my character would have done.
See? Good role-playing.
So, and so, what kind of characters do you tend to like to play, Nathaniel?
Shrill idiots. Just to list a few, I played a lunatic Irishman who kind of just yelled and was loud.
Banjax?
It was very
had
a good outlook on life.
Who was the servant of my character, Ursula.
Yeah, and I was your gardener, but I also took the flaw Touch of Frost, so things wither when I touch them.
He was playing a Ravnos in Vampire, and I was playing a Tremere.
Yeah, and in our Changeling game, I played a, 3,000-year-old Sicilian plague demon who dressed up like one of those cool plague doctors with the masks. Yes.
And you starved your horse.
And I tortured my horse, and he sounded like Raul Julia.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you tend to play...
I tend to start with my B+ impression and build a character around it.
Fops, I would say.
Fops is a good word for it.
Yeah.
What kind of characters do you play, Randy?
So it's interesting. I was taking stock of it, and my first character was a Nosferatu, and I've noticed I tend to, from there, play 2 characters. I play the Sneaky Sneakersons, so that was my Nosferatu. In the Changeling game, I play a Shapeshifter. We're never going to play that again. The reason I never want to go into the undead world, whatever it's called again, is because I killed my brother. And his ghost is haunting me.
I do remember you spending at least a few sessions transformed into Carl from Aqua Teen Hunger Force.
Carl Lolly, because my character's name was Solali.
Great play on words.
And then I also tend to play brawlers, but like lovable redheaded brawlers. It's very specific. So I had a character in Star Wars who was a brawler. She was a scoundrel. And I had Tarzania in the mage game that we played.
Be respectful, use the full title.
Tarzania, Woman of Wonder.
There we go.
Mr. Roosevelt wouldn't allow it. And it was interesting because I was talking to my dad about this podcast, and we'll talk about why I was talking to my dad in a minute. And he said when he played in the 70s, he always played barbarian berserker type characters.
Those are fun.
Yes, they are fun. They're very fun. So the other thing I wanted to talk about, because we're using very specific materials for this podcast, we're not using 5e.
Oh, no.
No.
Yeah, we should probably really stress this up front.
And we'll stress it up front in episode 1 as well. We're not using 5e, and that's because of a particular reason, which is the 2 of us grew up with specific D&D materials. And so I grew up with my dad's Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, the first edition but not the first printing rules. So I had the 1983 Monster Manual number 2, 1979 Monster Manual number 1. I can't remember.
Sounds right.
And you grew up with your older brother's materials, right?
Yes. My older brother, who was, I'm cool, but then he was cooler at the time. I'd like to think of overtaking him.
Well, he has a cooler first name.
Yeah.
I don't know. He's a tattoo artist.
He's pretty rad. In any case, we got started on that long before we actually bought any real materials. We got the Monstrous Compendiums.
And that was the binder, right?
Those are the binders. Now, this differs from the Monster Manual and the Monstrous Manual. Now, in Canada, the whole thing is reversed, but the Monstrous Compendiums were those absolutely massive binders, and if you don't see them too often, it's because it's hard to find them in good shape because they tore to pieces all the time. However, they were probably the largest collection of monsters. I'm basing this on nothing, but I'm going to say it was probably the largest compendium that TSR ever put out. And, I mean, when you're however many years old I was, nothing's cooler than monsters. Playing the game's incidental compared to looking at the monsters.
So do you remember the Zoo Books binder?
Oh,
You could
heavens,
send
yes.
off for it, and it would come with cards. And some of those of you who are 90s kids might remember this as well.
Oh, Randy, let me amend that. Only 90s kids will remember
Oh, okay. Wait, we're gate openers, not gatekeepers, Nathaniel.
Yes.
That the binder was like that. The idea that TSR had would be you wouldn't have to buy these manuals. You could buy cards as you needed them and put them in the binder.
And then have them fall out and tear.
And then that also was a very non-profitable decision for TSR.
Yeah, that was, and that's, not to get totally off track. That's another reason I want to focus on TSR throughout the 70s and 80s. And I say this with all the love in the world to a terrific company and a great hobby. There were times when you could not have run the company more ineffectively if you had tried. And that legitimately fascinates me in some cases.
I think, from what I remember about the way TSR was run, some of it was fear that like one person would take over the person who was in charge. Mm-hmm. And then part of it was everyone at TSR assumed that everyone was going to love D&D as much as they loved D&D.
Yeah.
I think was part of it.
So, forgive me, but that slightly salacious element, I mean, it's the same reason I read books like Console Wars and The Life and Death of Peter Sellers. That's my version of true crime, is corporate malfeasance.
And so I didn't play a D&D type game. Oh, I played GURPS once. That was probably the worst system I ever played in.
It's so universal,
because
though.
The storyteller.
Oh, okay.
And that's something else that I want to talk about when we get to Drizzt.
Drizzt. Looming like a shadow in our future.
And so I did not play a D&D game until I was 19.
Okay.
Like a game using D&D rules. I also played the D6 Star Trek game. I was a Bajordassian. I'm just giving my background, jeez.
I said literally nothing.
You said nothing, but you looked at me with judgment.
I had a tone.
And so I grew up reading the old manuals that my dad had, which were the Monster Manuals and the Dungeon Master's Guide. And the art was the thing that really drew me in. And let's not say that this is great art. Neither one of us are particularly accomplished artists, and I think we both agree that in TSR's origins, we could have been artists for TSR.
Yes. No, that's fantastic.
And that's not to dunk on them. They were doing something very new.
Yes, and I will say this, in preparation for the podcast, Randy lent me her copy of D&D's Art and Arcano.
It's a really good book.
Yeah, which if you're at all interested, it's massive, visual Bible for the series, and starts from the beginning, and if I'm being honest, I like the ratchet art.
Yeah.
I like when it looks kind of, I won't say terrible, that's easy, but unprofessional, roughshod, kind of infused with a certain 70s psychedelia. Mm-hmm. And it's almost like when it moves into 3rd and 4th and 5th edition, the artwork gets better and better, and I almost get less interested in it. It stands out for me a little less.
The one thing I think was interesting that Art and Arcana is a Wizards of the Coast book. Like, mm-hmm. It's not an unofficial book. It's official, and I really would recommend it if you have a spare $50 to spend on, like, a coffee table book. It was a good buy because I had a gift card.
Yeah, you find a Grant sitting in your pocket. He's on the 50, right? When did I last see a $50 bill? I
haven't seen a $50 bill in forever. Why use cash? We're millennials. Anyway. They're pretty upfront that a lot of TSR's first art was stolen. Like, they didn't like straight up steal the art. They stole like the poses, they stole like characteristics.
Oh yes, largely from Nick Fury of all things.
Yeah.
In fact, TSR, most people don't know, stands for totally super ripped off.
Okay. Yeah. So another thing, I know you don't want to answer this question, but I think it's worth saying. What year were you born? You can give us a range.
I think it's more interesting to look at what year was TSR born.
I was born in 88.
Yeah.
And so that's to emphasize this, that we're using books that were already out of date by the time I was born.
Okay. And I was born at a point before Randy was.
Yes, he's older than me, but I forget how much older, and he won't tell me.
She once had me admit what zodiac sign I was so that she could be all Mycroft Holmes about it. But
Not
then she
zodiac.
forgot. Chinese zodiac.
Yes, and then I forgot.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I also saw your ID once and I forgot your birth year.
I didn't get specific because I'm not racist, right?
I'm not a regular friend. I'm a bad friend. And so,
I'm not a regular zodiac. I'm a Chinese zodiac. So the main thing that interested us, first and foremost, as we said, was the monsters. But we also fell in love with all the other weird, usually kind of bad media.
Like the Bruce Payne movies?
Oh yes, Bruce, tons of pain. So we're going to be taking this approach with the podcast, and as you guys can see if you keep up. Since we love monsters so much, every odd-numbered episode, 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, 11, 13, 15,
Stop.
all of the odd-numbered episodes, we are going to focus on monsters. And in a moment, Randy can explain how that works, because I think she seemed eager to do that. All of the even-numbered episodes, which you guys can fill in the blanks there, the even-numbered episodes are going to be focusing on Dungeons & Dragons media, which is usually not that good, with some rare exceptions.
Yeah. So we're starting with the cartoons.
Yes. The first 3 odd episodes, that would be, 2, 4, and 6, we will be looking at the first...
First 3 even episodes.
Yes. The
Okay.
first... Randy, please, I'm talking to the nice people. Yeah, the first 3 even-numbered episodes, we will be covering the first 9 episodes of the Dungeons & Dragons cartoon.
And you thought there wasn't going to be any math in this.
Oh, yes. It's D&D. You gotta add, thacos and tacos, and I don't even know anymore. They've surely phased that out in 5th edition, right?
Yes.
Thank God.
Taco is just...
It's just terrible.
It's 1E, right? Or was it also in 2E?
It was up to 2E.
Okay.
Yeah. Only 90s kids will know about Thaco.
Okay, so the first episode is going to be a Beast episode. Second episode, we're going to talk about the first 3 episodes of the D&D cartoon.
Mm-hmm.
So the way it's going to work for monster episodes is we each pick 5 monsters and then we roll to see which one each of us talk about. So we'll have a total of 2 monsters per episode. So we've already rolled for episode 1 and we'll tell you the monsters at the end of this episode.
Mm-hmm.
So this way there's some sense of randomness, but we're also not just picking our favorite monsters, and we're alternatively not going alphabetically.
Yeah, which would be terrible.
Yeah.
We have our bench. Each one of us has our team of monsters, but to keep us on our toes, we dice for them before every monster episode.
And so we each kind of leaned towards different materials for our monsters.
Oh, yes.
I have chosen almost exclusively from the monster manuals as written by Gary Gygax, and you selected all of your monsters thus far from the
Fiend Folio.
And we'll talk a little bit about the Fiend Folio in episode 1, but it is TSR UK's monster manual.
You can't spell folio without folly.
Yes. Well, I mean...
You can't pronounce it.
Okay.
It's the Fiend Folio.
Okay. So the last thing I want to talk about is our characters.
Oh, yes.
So we're not playing this traditionally, but we do have characters that will make appearances as we figure it out, because we like funny voices.
Yeah, it makes the interactive aspect of this a little more fun.
So do you want to talk about your character first?
Oh, sure.
Did you write a bio for him?
I did not.
Did you draw your character?
I had a better artist draw it for me.
Okay.
You can see it every weeknight at 5, 6, and 7.
Okay.
My character is the wizard Convolvulus Carnifex.
Convolvulus Carfax?
Yes.
Okay.
You need to check the Carfax.
Okay.
That's where Dracula lives. Convolvulus Carnifex is an out-of-work necromancer. He spent all of his money, and all of his parents' money, going to wizard school, and then it turned out when he graduated there was a heavily oversaturated wizard job market.
Okay.
Yeah. The best roles are the ones that draw from real life.
And you should have heard him in the promo, if you listened to the promo.
Oh, yeah. Oh, you should have heard this guy.
Yeah. My character is Rosalind Rosenbow, who is a wandering bardess. She largely performs at children's birthday parties, which is where she met Convolvulus.
I was there.
Yeah.
I was doing the sorcery show.
She shares a mysterious link to the Princess Rosa of Incrance and Guildenstern Kingdom. What's that connection? We might find out.
Pause for laugh.
Well, you did laugh.
I know.
So what do you expect from me? So that's it for my notes. Was there anything else you want to say in episode 0 that people should know about?
Oh, not necessarily. Again, if I assure you we are better hosts than we are explainers.
Yeah, this is not our forte, but I know some people like to know.
When we get to it, you guys will fall into the routine pretty quickly. 1 week's going to be monsters. Next week is going to be... I mean, we can basically talk about whatever we want. We got D&D movies, D&D video games. There might be a D&D breakfast cereal for all I know.
Settings, novels.
Oh, yes. Including, who did we mention?
Drist.
Yes.
Is it Drist or Dritst?
I always went with Dritst.
But the Z is before the T. Drist.
Yeah, Dritst.
Okay. Well, that dude.
Yeah,
that super fun guy, the life of the party. We're going to talk the hell out of him.
We're going to talk about so many scimitars.
And so one thing we want to make clear is we're the kind of people who are, I mean, how would you describe us? Like dicks? We're kind of like dicks.
Yeah.
And we're going to try very hard not to be mean-spirited about these books because they're things that people love and they're things that we love, but also they're kind of like dumb sometimes.
Yeah. And... I mean this with sincerity. That's what attracts me to the older D&D stuff, because it's not just the nostalgia factor. Randy can attest to this. I'm kind of like an anti-nostalgist in many ways. But I find that when it comes to a lot of these pop culture properties, I like when they were a little more unprofessional. Mm-hmm. Like, I like the old 70s Godzilla movies when they look like crap, but they're super fun.
But the actor was going to the zoo to figure out how lizards moved so he could, like, mimic it.
Yes.
There was so much love in it.
Yeah. I love, I'm not into Marvel now. I have a soft spot for old school Marvel comics, where they're just huge and kind of Stan Lee is a huckster and Jack Kirby's drawing explosions everywhere. And same thing, my biggest fondness for Dungeons and Dragons is the era where they were basing monsters on toys that Gary Gygax bought from a dollar store.
Or that he modified.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that sort of
That's
thing.
why there's so many dinosaurs.
And even when stuff sucked, it sucked because it was new and they were still figuring out what to do. I love the fact we'll have an opportunity to talk about some of the most notoriously bad modules. And it's inarguable that, like, 5th edition may be the best edition they've ever done for all I know.
I think it's the cleanest.
Yeah, but that's through a sense of trial and error. Whereas this is more like, yeah, you guys could fly in an airplane, but just once in your life, wouldn't you want to fly in one of those little ornithopters that the Wright brothers tried that didn't work?
Yeah,
that's what this podcast is going to be.
That makes perfect sense and wasn't at all confusing.
Well, it's a visual metaphor, so I figure it works.
Okay, so real quick before we go, I have a few people I want to thank, and you might want to add in some people as well. First and foremost, we want to thank Anna Steinbauer, who did our cover
Cheers.
art.
Yeah.
Yes. Oh, let's actually clink to that.
Clink.
Wouldn't it have been horrible if I broke that Captain America cup? I've already broken so many of these like special Marvel collector's cups. So Anna has done so much for us, including the cover art, but she has also provided us feedback and support, and so we thank her heartily. I'm going to link to her webpage, Imprint store, and Patreon if you want to check it out. Her Patreon's really cool, especially if you're into creating digital art. A huge thanks to her.
Donka.
I also want to thank Randy Robles, husband of the show.
Oh, okay.
He is going to be our editor, and he is our webmaster, and he also puts up with a lot of shit from me. So I just want to thank him for that.
Or as I always treat him like a perfect angel.
Yes. I want to thank Irene Chan, who composed our intro and outro and was very patient with me as I described what I wanted as a fanfare, but like for two idiots.
Yeah. Or my instructions for you to instruct her, gauntlet, but not that.
Because it's copyrighted. And I want to thank Cliff Bossy, my dad, for giving me the books. Did you want to thank anyone? Was there anyone?
Well, I wanted to thank you guys and all the people you just mentioned, but Randy maybe knows them better than I do. I want to thank my older brother for just getting me into role-playing games.
Did he DM for you and your younger brother?
He did,
Okay.
and it was a pretty ramshackle affair, and I don't think we had a session that ran longer than about 2 sessions.
Okay.
Our campaign, I mean to say. But it was a lot of fun, and we moved around a bit, so we made our own entertainment, and he was usually pretty good at being the ringleader for that. Unlike yours truly, he's maybe a more accomplished artist, and if anybody cares, you can check out his Instagram profile. It's Who Asked Burke, Burke, all one word. Again, like, if you like me, you'll probably like him. That's just transitive property.
Just like I'm going to put links up for Anna, I'll put up a link to, because he was also a tattoo artist in Virginia?
Yes, Virginia Beach.
Okay.
Oh no, now people will stalk him.
Oh no!
And
it's not like he would want the business.
And I would also just like to thank my younger brother, basically because we just treated him like shit all the time, because it's 3 brothers and he was the youngest one. And he probably put up with a lot of crap from us during those games. So I just want to say I love you and I hope you like the podcast.
I'd like to invite you to check out our website, pretendiumpod.com, if you haven't already, where I'll put up the links for all of these things. We also have a tweeter that you can follow us on, @Pretendium, and there is a Facebook group called the Pretendium Posse. It's a closed group, so you'll have to ask to join, but we let anyone in. We just want to keep those spammers out.
We are gate openers.
Gate openers. We turned mind flayers into kind players. I would also like to invite you to listen to the next 2 episodes before you rate or review. In episode 2, I'll talk about a little promotion that we have for reviews on iTunes. So thank you very much for listening. Nathaniel, you want to take us out?
Alia jacta est.
Hey nerds, I'm just dipping back in to let you know what our next episode is going to be about. So in episode 1, we will be talking about the hook horror in the executioner's hood. See you then. Smell you later.
Don't say smell you later.